Egunon guztioi, jaun Andreok, mi esker gaur hemen
Good morning, everyone. I want to start by thanking you all for being here with us. Welcome to the day of participation in Gipuzkoa. This is the first time we hold this event. I also want to welcome those of you who are following us on streaming. This event has been organized by the Provincial Council of Gipuzkoa to promote participation of people in companies, and so that we can better see the results of this participation as a result of collaborative governance of the different stakeholders who've been participation that's been promoted, whether it's for management, for decision-making, or for ownership. All of those successes actually have some figures. 431 companies in Gipuzkoa have been given subsidies in our province for employee participation. Over 1,100 people have been part of the Etorkizuna Eraikiz program with transformative projects. Gipuzkoa is a very diverse territory where we understand participation in many different ways, always with commitment and engagement from people for better cohesion in our territory. This is what we want to see and visualize both from within and from outside. The Etorkizuna Eraikiz project has been acknowledged as best practice internationally, and you've been given a book about financial participation in Europe following this project. So we want to share today, together with our guests and experts, details about these models and successes. And we will now be hearing from the Provincial Council President, Mr. Markel Olano, for the official opening. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you all to our Day for Participation in Gipuzkoa. It's the first time this event is held, and it's a particular pleasure for me to be here with you today, and in a venue like Chillida Leku, looking beautiful this sunny morning, and also thinking of Chillida, the sculptor, everything that connects us to our identity, our heritage, looking at his sculptures. And I was thinking that I once went to the Chillida factory in Legazpi, in the town of Legazpi, and you can really see there the connection between Chillida and our industrial heritage. So again, this is a particularly fit venue, in my opinion. I would also like to thank all the organizers of this event, starting by mentioning Thomas Arrieta, and also Mr. Jens Lowitz, who's following us remotely online, who's the author of the book we're going to be talking about today. We feel very honored to have him with us today. Employee participation in companies is something that's totally part of our industrial model in Gipuzkoa. Our culture, the way we understand work, having employees taking part in the companies is something that's very much rooted to our identity, to the way we are. And we shouldn't forget that the main cooperative group internationally was born very near where we're meeting today. So we also have the term auzolan in the Basque language, which means community work or work for the common good. That is to help well-being in our society. We wanted to contribute somehow to all these models And we want to do so by presenting the book Financial Participation for a New Social Europe, written by Professor Jens Lowitz. And in my opinion, Gipuzkoa is a model to follow, a benchmark. We've been studied, benchmarked with Europe, and Javi, Joaquin, many of you sitting here today perfectly well saw years ago that Gipuzkoa is a territory where these values are promoted. We were aware that our industrial fabric, mostly because we have a lot of SMEs, family-owned companies, where the handover could be difficult, or business succession could be difficult if we don't do things right. That was a concern we've had for quite some time. So over the years, we've been implementing different initiatives with various stakeholders in collaboration with them, and thanks to all these actions, we found that by having leverage from one to the other, and we've seen and witnessed the improvement both for society and for companies, including employees. Both Joaquin and Javi will tell us about that more later on today, about the different projects and actions. I'm just going to quickly mention some of them. Training has been very important in what we've done. Hundreds of companies have received support from the Provincial Council to help participation in decision-making at different levels. As I said, we've had programs of subsidies that we are very happy looking at the outcomes now. Then we also have some 20 pilot projects within the Etorkizuna Eraikiz umbrella, the Building the Future model, which have proven highly beneficial. Then we also have Elkargi with funds and helping employees become owners of their own companies. And last but not least, tax incentives. Since 2003, we've been working on programs in that field too. So financial participation and helping as much as we can from the point of view of taxes, I think says a lot about our powers in the field of taxation. Because of our particular situation where we raise our own taxes, we have to realize that we are in a very special position. Sometimes we're not aware of how much it is the case, and we should make it visible. Because of that, we have a very appealing tax model that can really promote and enhance employee participation in companies. So again, financially and taxation-wise, if we do things right, then we'll be working both for employers, for owners, very often, as I said earlier, companies where owners will soon retire, and make sure that we promote an easier handover, an easier transfer of those businesses. And also we should make it appealing and interesting for employees, for them to see participation as something positive. 1,735 people have been part of participation projects in 319 different companies in our province, in Gipuzkoa. That's only in 5 years. I think we can be very satisfied with what's been done. The trend is rising as well. That's very promising. So we can see the fruit of some of the actions and projects we've been implementing, and that totally benefits companies, employees, the quality of jobs. It's got a lot of advantages as well, from the point of view of the routing of companies and jobs to our territory for them to stay here. And I was talking earlier briefly about handover and business transfer. Well, thinking about the future, we want to help as much as we possibly can with ownership. The concept of business ownership has to go hand in hand with professional management, and for employee participation to be solid in the future, they need help with training, with awareness raising. So again, this is a model that's benefiting a lot both employers and employees. So just to finish now, I would like to just mention that employee participation is paramount also for territorial and social cohesion. Our aim is for Gipuzkoa to be a model for others to follow, also from the point of view of social cohesion. And we can only manage it if the private domain, if businesses help us to. Social cohesion goes hand in hand in society with solidarity. And I would like, though, just to finish by saying that the event here today is a reflection of fantastic work that has been done by so many people. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much, Mr. Olano, Mr. President. And I would say that Gipuzkoa is a very integrative territory with something in common for all the stakeholders, people being the focus, talent, retention, routing of companies to our territory. But not all companies and stakeholders in Gipuzkoa understand employee participation and people's participation in the same manner. And that's why we want to see how this model is seen by different stakeholders. In video, please.
Adekin partaietza zentzu zabalean, proiektu partekatuan, oinarritzen dugu. Hoixe da, bultzatzen ari garen, enpresa kultura berriaren helburua. Enpresa konfiantzan, oinarritutako proiektu partekatua bihurtzea. Non, denok batera arraun egiten dugun gure helburuak lortzeko. Horretarako, enpresa kultura berriak 8 printzipio aldarrikatzen ditu, helburu inspiratzailea, konfiantza, balio partekatuak, pertsonen ongizatea, lidergo eraldatzailea, informazio gardena, komunikazio eraginkorra eta kudeaketan edo emaitzetan parte hartzea.
Bueno, participar para nosotros, pues participar está dentro de nuestro ADN, ¿no? Formar parte de un equipo de trabajo. Para nosotros el equipo de trabajo es algo nuclear, donde practicamos la participación. Participar, como he dicho, es formar parte de algo, es formar parte de un proyecto compartido, compartir la visión, compartir el esfuerzo por sacar adelante ese proyecto, ¿no? Eso es lo que nosotros entendemos por participación.
Employee participation is twofold. On one hand, employees can be members, partners, or managers, shareholders of the company. On the other hand, employees have also the possibility, and this possibility should be given, to participate actively in the company decision and in the company life and in the production.
La participación es un valor, es un principio de actuación que cuando lo llevamos al ámbito de la empresa se materializa o se puede materializar en tres dimensiones distintas, ¿no? Tenemos la posibilidad de desarrollar una gestión participativa basado en criterios de transparencia, información, potenciando la comunicación. También tenemos la participación en los resultados empresariales, el compartir con las personas, ¿no? El fruto del trabajo, el día a día. Y la tercera dimensión es la participación en el capital, la participación financiera, en la que lo que procuramos es que las personas se corresponsabilicen con el proyecto empresarial. Todas ellas son participación y todas ellas contribuyen a tener una empresa más competitiva. Lo que sí que es cierto es que si consideramos que la participación es algo positivo, es algo que trasciende, es algo que diríamos algo que tiene atributos muy positivos, cuanto más participación o más impulsemos la participación en el seno de la empresa, vamos a alcanzar esa competitividad en mayor medida. Y por eso, desde ASLA entendemos que la verdadera transformación en la empresa se produce a través de la participación en el capital, porque eso supone que las personas se corresponsabilicen con el proyecto, que sea un proyecto compartido, objetivos compartidos.
Existen diferentes modelos para gestionar un negocio y entre todos ellos Gamesa ha elegido el modelo participativo porque pone a las personas en el centro de la organización y creemos que es a través de ellas el medio por el que podemos generar un proyecto más competitivo y sostenible a medio-largo plazo. Es cierto que pertenecemos a una región geográfica que está anclada en las tradiciones y que durante años las empresas han sido gestionadas y lideradas de alguna manera también tradicional. Y en Gamesa, que estamos en el centro del Goierri y somos 24 personas, también pertenecemos a un sector muy tradicional. Esto no tiene nada de malo, pero es cierto que vivimos en un entorno cada vez más cambiante y exigente y nos obligaba de alguna manera a cambiar y hacer una transformación en nuestra compañía. Por lo que en el año 2019 comenzamos nuestra transformación cultural en el que las personas cobraban un protagonismo especial.
Donc la participation, ça ne veut rien dire. On participe toujours à quelque chose. Alors la participation des salariés dans l'entreprise, c'est 1000 choses. C'est travailler, c'est respecter la santé, c'est manger, c'est faire du télétravail. Y a tellement de choses auxquelles on peut participer que dire simplement la participation, c'est un fourre-tout, donc ça ne veut rien dire.
Bueno, la participación de las personas en la empresa ha sido algo que siempre ha estado en la empresa. Lo que pasa es que evidentemente ahora estamos viendo una evolución del mundo en el que estamos desarrollando las empresas nuestro trabajo y esto significa que tenemos que adaptar esa participación. ¿A qué me refiero? Estamos en un mundo evidentemente con cambios que ya nos llegan y en los que poco podemos hacer, nada más que aprovecharlos y gestionarlos, como es la digitalización, cambios que tenemos que emprender como sociedad sin duda alguna, como es la sostenibilidad. Estos cambios van a requerir de una adaptación en el mundo empresarial y esa adaptación lo que necesita es de que todos aquellos que estén en la empresa participen de manera activa en la gestión de los mismos. Por lo tanto, creo que estamos mirando mucho a la participación de la empresa desde el ámbito del empresario, mucho desde el ámbito del trabajador, poco desde el ámbito de la sociedad y poco sobre todo desde el ámbito del producto. Es ahí donde tiene que estar la participación.
Gure enpresan Open partaidetza giltzarri da eta maila ezberdinetan ematen da. Kudeaketan, emaitzetan eta jabegoan. Guztiz partekatua den proiektua da geurea eta horrek eskatzen du enpresa proiektua eta pertsonen arteko lerrokatze maila handi bat eta noizean behin ere enpresa proiektu hori eguneratu eta moldatu beharra pertsonen interesetara lerrokatu ahal izateko.
Employee participation is all about the employees having voice, both individually and as a group, and also having a share in the financial success of their company, all underpinned by good work.
Bueno, langileen partaidetza eta partaidetza orokoar kontzeptu bezala, gure esperientzia kooperatiboan muinean egon da kontzeptu izan da betidanik, ezta? 60 urteko esperientzia kooperatiboan bi elementu egon badi ardatz, bat izan da pertsonei protagonismo berezi ematea aktibitate ekonomikoan, eta bigarrena aktibitate ekonomikoari gizartearen zerbitzura jartzea, ezta? Hortaz, oinarrizko kontzeptu bat eta guk ulertu izan dugun bezala, parte hartzearen modu integral bat idurikatzen dugu, ezta? 3 eremutan, bata gestion parte hartzea, hau da eguneroko erabakietan eta eguneko lanean norberaren aportazio egitea. Bigarrena, emaitzetan parte hartzea, enpresaren irabazi edo galeretan tokatzen danean parte izatea, eta hirugarrena, elementu zentrala, jabetzan edo propietatean parte hartzea, ezta?
La participación en la empresa entendemos que tiene que ser a los 3 niveles, en la gestión, en los beneficios y en el capital. En muchas ocasiones se inicia por la participación en la gestión y creemos que eso es ineficiente y que no llega al nivel necesario. Por otra parte, la participación en la empresa nos parece que es importante el nivel de proyecto compartido, que el equipo sea capaz, porque al final se constituye un equipo como empresa, de trabajar en equipo, de integrar el equipo, todos ser parte de ese equipo y pues aunar esfuerzos para pues, conseguir los objetivos de la empresa.
When I think of employee participation, I think of the opposite of alienation. We talk about alienation and people feeling disconnected in a lot of ways, and I think employee participation is the perfect opposite of it. Alienation is when people feel separated from the product of what they do at work. It's when they feel separated from their coworkers, from their communities, and when they actually are separated from the value, from the profit of what they create. Employee participation is the antidote to all of those things, because it pulls everybody together into a single team for a single purpose, and we all share together, not only in the creation of what we're doing at work, but also in the benefits that we get from being at work together. It's a lot like sports in the sense of having a sense of community, a sense of teamwork. But just like sports, we've got that sense of team, but then we also are creating something practical and important, the product of our joint work together. And we also share together for the benefits of ourselves and our families. So in my mind, employee participation is just what the world needs now. Another way to build people, to bring us together for a common, practical, beneficial purpose.
Bueno, comenzamos.
Okay, very well. So let's continue. We are going to start with the presentations, and we are going to start with somebody who is very important in this field. We are going to listen to Mr. Tomás Arrieta Eras. He is the chairman of the Labor Relations Council. He's going to be talking about employees' participation as a cohesive element. Whenever you want, the floor is yours. Good morning. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for giving me the possibility to participate. That is the key word today. I am going to try and make my little contribution. I was watching the video and I was listening to Mr. Olano, and I was saying, what can I add? What can be my contribution? So from the technical point of view, I think that, well, we have already said the most important things. But once again, it is a pleasure being here. It is a pleasure to share with all of you what I believe in, even if this is not my usual work of line. It is a pleasure for me to be sharing with you my ideas in this region, even if, as I have just said, all of you know already what I'm going to be sharing with you, and that you will all agree. So this reflection, it is true that it is geared towards knowing how to move forward. How can we accelerate this cohesion and employees' participation? That will be the focus, and I will be talking in general terms about the subject. Well, I'm going to show and share with you this PowerPoint presentation, and I started by wondering exactly this. Yes, moving forward, but what is the starting point? That is essential, knowing where we are. And sometimes it is as if we already knew, as if all paradigms, as if all categories were already obsolete, something that we have overcome, and I don't think so. I think that we have to start by thinking, where are we? What is the starting point? What is our current day situation? Which are the measures which are being implemented? Which are the paradigms in these starting points? And also, which are our mental categories, our subconscious categories and ideas? And then where are we going to? Where are we heading? And why do we want to move forward? And third, the idea is, how are we going to be moving forward? How do we want to make this happen? And that is what I would like to share with you right now. This is almost like a commonplace in these different meetings. We start by saying that the model we have, the labor relations model we have, and we know that there are many different companies that do not reply or fit within this idea, this paradigm. But this is the paradigm that we have, the common paradigm. And within this basic paradigm or idea, our labor relations model, it still is a highly or essentially confrontational labor relations model. And second, as a result of this confrontational labor relations model, what I will like now to try and explain is that the participation we have, or at least from the legal point of view, what do you mean? Participation, how it is considered, employees' participation in the companies, it is hugely conditioned by this confrontational labor relations model. And I can state and say that we are not talking about strict participation, that one. Let me try and explain what I mean. The existence of opposite interests in companies, something we can all understand. Well, we have entrepreneurs who are the owners. Profitability is going to be essential for them, but there are also going to be certain risks in this activity. And that is why it is true that sometimes there will be benefits, but also there will be losses. And it is up to the entrepreneur or to the owner to direct and to manage the activity, but that is not the case all over the place, and it is very good that this is progressively not like that. But in our labor act or labor law, entrepreneurs in certain cases are exclusively the managers and the directors of the business. And we have article number 20, which states exactly that. Who is directing? Who is managing? Who is in charge? Well, the entrepreneur, the one who assumes this risk linked to the activity. And versus the entrepreneur, the business owner, we have the employee, the worker, and we are oversimplifying, of course, but the goal for them is to reach labor stability. We all understand that perfectly well. That is a goal we all have. They also, of course, want to have a salary, a pay, decent and honest pay, which is the result of salary and time, you know, the combination between pay and time dedicated within their activity, and they are going to be designing an individual and collective strategy, always on the base of this paradigm: salary, reward, pay, time, but away from the results and without having any participation in terms of ownership. So this model that I am introducing right now, collective bargaining has been the method to try and explain this paradigm that is still in the heart. A long time ago, I think that was maybe 15 years ago, within our Labor Relations Council, we carried out an exercise and we wanted to try and research into the qualitative content of collective bargaining, and we found what we already thought we would be finding. Many collective bargaining agreements are articulated around these two aspects: salary, time spent. And from there, the progressive negotiation, they negotiate other rights. I said before that this doesn't generate participation in the strict sense, participating in the management or in results, but it generates participation through organs which are external to the company, which are outside the company. What I mean is that the structures through which employees are going to be participating, that is, for example, unitary representation, legal representation of workers, these are structures which are external, and they play this role of surveillance and the control of monitoring, and also they can carry out different actions in favor of the people they represent. This goes against the participation model articulated through internal structures, which is much more linked, which is much more connected with those other co-management systems, and much more linked to organs which are integrated within the company, for example, under the shape of surveillance committees. The difference is essential. What we call participation, and once again, I insist that maybe this is not the idea that you share, but when we speak about participation from the legal point of view or from the model design point of view, this has very little to do or nothing to do with real participation. This is just something intermediary, an intermediary stage through which there are certain structures through which workers, employees can verify that business owners are respecting collective bargaining. So this is the paradigm, this is the situation. Each of them is going to be defining his or her own interests. Here, where union takes place at this level, in this situation, each of them are going to be one managing and benefiting from the success or the losses, and the others verifying that their rights are being respected. It is easy to understand and to reach the conclusion according to which this is a game which is very well represented in the tug-of-war game or sport, and that is the image or the situation. And José Miguel from Adegui and many other people have been using this image to express and to say that this is a model where one is winning but the other one is losing, and the aggregated result will only be zero. So I think that it is only evident that it is absolutely paramount and essential to change this model. And it is essential to think and to reflect about this paradigm. And I may be wrong, but once again, I think that that is the paradigm which is there in our mind and which is making it very difficult for us to try and promote and accelerate participation. Moving towards this collaborative paradigm implies an essential possibility in Kantian terms. What do I mean by that? If we do not make this change, it will be impossible to consolidate a relationships model where we will be promoting more and more participation. So how can we move forward? How can we go beyond? It is evident we need to go towards more cooperative labor models. And how can we make that happen? Well, each of us have a little contribution to make, our own modest contribution to make. But that is very, very important because participation is exactly that. By adding our effort together, we increase the collective value. And by doing so, we also increase the value of our contribution. We need to work to keep on working around new narratives. Events such as this one today is essential, and there are essential actors and stakeholders such as social agents who need to get engaged into this deep reflection. Yes, they need to be reflecting, thinking, and studying all this. We need to change the paradigm. We need the entrepreneurial engagement, and we were speaking about that in the video. Virtuous examples. It is also essential to have the trade unions there joining hands. We need also that strong trade union commitment, even if sometimes there are resistances from trade unions. I think that is conditioned by that unconscious paradigms, and that is why I started by trying to tell you where we are. But I think it is only essential to also have that strong trade union commitment. And if we need consensus, we also need to include public administrations. And the Diputación, the provincial government in Gipuzkoa, is an excellent example, and they are paving the way. And I think that all the rest, all the other public administrations should be following their example. And I also think, and we could see that through the videos, I think that something essential as well is to try and identify that common interest and to speak about new transactions. What do I mean by that? We need a new equilibrium, a new balance, a whole new set of equilibriums or balance. I was talking about tug of war, that game. But we could also be thinking about the fact of all being together on the same boat, and we have to be all together, rowing together, but we won't need to know where we are heading to, and that implies participating at all the different decision-making processes so as to know where are we heading to. And then we need also to know how are we going to be distributing the rewards, the success. Tug of war. If we understand tug of war as the reasonable participation or sharing the virtuous results when we are able to row all of us together, and I don't know if I am making myself clear, we need to be able to distribute all those benefits. Rowing is essential, but once the race is over, once we all have made an effort together, then we need to be able to share that success and share the financial success. Something elemental, something essential, but it has to be made clear, and that implies carrying out this reflection. The company is not a whole set of opposite interests. Of course, there are going to be different interests, and we will have to be transparent, and we need to negotiate and use dialogue, but yes, common interests, which are just as evident and clear, because if we do not have sustainability, we won't have jobs. Yes, sustainability is essential for all of us, and that is a shared interest, common interest. But in the video, somebody said that we also need to improve employees' health. Something essential is to improve the environment, to try and know how to manage diversity, but also taking into account our own specificities. We also need to improve gender equality. Today, that is a huge challenge. That is something essential today. Gender balance. If we believe in this approach, we all will agree that this is only beneficial to all of us, employers, business owners. If we are able to make these common interests explicit, and if we are able to be conscious that those transactions imply sharing the success between all of us, then we will be on the right path. It is not easy, but it is essential. And there are many different subjects where those common interests will always be there on the list. Going back to this confrontational model, yes, we need to overcome that confrontational model. That is where we should be heading to, as I said before. That is essential. That is a starting point. But there are different elements for or against this revision. And I have carried out a little exercise, and I have tried to put black on white some of those elements which are more important. We have to be talking, and this is not just a desire or a goal that we desire, but something essential is that we need to organize work in a different way, new forms of work organization. If we do not work in a different way through horizontal management systems, which is the second element for we companies, business owners, we all realize that we won't be efficient. Our results won't be as good as they could, and we won't be competitive in this highly globalized and competitive world. So we are going in this direction. It is compulsory, but we need to take advantage of this thrust. This is a reality which is generating a favorable context to promote participation. There is no doubt whatsoever, and I think that we all share the growing theorization of new models of competitiveness based on people, based on employee. And I don't want to accuse anybody. We talk about people, employees, people are the key. And that is clear, of course. People have to be in the heart. If we do not have people, employees, what is the point? People have to be in the heart. That idea is essential. And that is why that is not just a feeling, a sensation, or an intuition. More and more, this becomes a theoretic model, highly rooted even in the academia and among the experts. And I was also talking about the progressive requirements for democratization in companies. And maybe this is not very specific, but I wanted it to be there. Because traditional hierarchical models Traditional hierarchical models correspond to a different way of thinking. A way of thinking which does not correspond anymore very well with our idea, the idea we have of ourselves as citizens, asking, demanding more and more democracy. We want our rights to be respected. We want our standards of living to be better. I'm thinking about my father, my ancestors, my grandpa. At that point, they couldn't put into question things because, as soon as they were in the business, in the factory, they either were the manager or the worker. The manager was in command, and workers and employees just had to respect whatever he or she said. So all this has been evolving. These rights are they have to be part of our experience, not only outside the factories and the companies, but also inside the companies. But it is only evident that we cannot forget that there are many elements against. Some of them, there are different inertias, breaks, ideological positions, ideologies and ideological positions. Sometimes we end up rationalizing different positions which are not really positions, but sometimes prejudices. For example, there are certain things that we accept. How am I going to be collaborating with entrepreneurs if entrepreneurs keep everything? When there are good results, they are the only ones benefiting from those good results, for example. Or that can be maybe a prejudice in the people, in the mind of certain people. And all that is transferred into certain discourses. And that is why I was talking about inertia and resistance to change. We're much more comfortable there where we have always been. That is nothing new. We are happy, we feel at ease where we know about things where we are not asked, we are not being asked to do anything different. We have that trend, that tendency. We like inertia. We know about how to do this and we do not want to change. And sometimes that implies that we have this natural resistance to change. We end up rationalizing a response that replies to that inertia. Well, training of unit representatives in order to join participatory managed models with guarantees. This is very important. If we want to incorporate and engage employees within the management of our companies in the decision-making process, if we want that to happen, they need to be trained. We cannot assume functions just like that. We need to be trained. We need to be ready to have the right skills, and that is always important. We need representatives. Yes, we need people who are going to be representing employees' rights, and they need to have the right skills to do that. If we want employees to join the decision-making process and to participate even in capital, if we want them to have that financial participation, then also we need representatives to have the right skills. The size of companies is important too. And also something important is that there is a lack of a network of agreements and or basic consensus to support and to provide security for these processes. And then there is also a lack of or deficit of trust. That is my impression. That is what I see when you come out of your microcosmos, and if we go and focus on a larger reality, what we see is that or from the place where I work, sometimes I see or I think that trust very, very often is not there. Trust is not there, and that can only have negative effects. Moving forward, where we want more engagement. Yes, that is important. And I think that through participation, and Yone spoke about that, the participation we want is, we know ownership participation, and I agree with that. But participation also implies participation in managerial terms. And there is a virtuous circle between participation and ownership. Participation, having a share in the financial success is important too. Yes, we need also different formulae to have a share in the financial success. I think that is necessary. Yes, and that has to go hand in hand with participation in management. These are the two most important elements, the two most important pillars to move forward and to increase employee participation and to overcome confrontation. And to finish, what else can I tell you? What for? Why? What is the goal? That is only clear because we want to have more engagement from our employee, because we want to increase our human capital, to improve competitiveness, and to also obtain more sustainability in our different regulatory status. What do I mean by that? I think, well, I am convinced that ASLE has played an essential role in this sense when in the new law for worker-owned companies, yes, the worker-owned companies law, there is a chapter for exactly co-ops and worker-owned companies define the different regulations. Yes, worker-owned companies need to have their own personality. They need to, how should I say it? We should be able to include here virtuous experiences, and I think this is good, and I think that that is the direction we should be going and heading to. Well, I think that we should improve the mechanisms we have and go towards a new way of thinking and talking about participation. This implies leaving behind the committee, which is just as a monitoring and control body, because it needs to be engaged within the company structure. And how can we make it happen? Well, we have regulations, we have collective bargaining, but it is true that we need to improve it and to be active and work, and we also need to go back to the concept of participation. What does this mean? When we have a unit representative, is an employee participating? No, I do not think so. That is not enough. Even if we speak about participation, or even if from the legal point of view, that is what it means. But participation has to go beyond. From the conceptual point of view, is something different. We need also to generate the structures, take advantage of collective bargaining. We also, of course, need to support the transition towards a greater levels of participation from the public sphere. Yes. In the Diputación, in the provincial government, that is only evident for them. And also we need to weave a network of agreements in and for companies that provides all we need. Security, flexibility, something that ensures the flow of relevant information and transparency. which are only essential if we want to generate trust. Without trust, we have nothing, but trust doesn't fall from heaven. Lack of trust is not something that has nothing to do with the context. We are within a context that does not generate trust. Let's change the context. Let's move forward. Let's generate trust. Let's improve our transparency, and I am sure that we will end up improving things. I haven't said anything new, of course, but I was just trying to share with you these elements. And what I wanted to tell is the following. I believe in participation. Participation is essential if we want to move forward and to improve the life of people and the efficiency of our companies. I am convinced of that. Let's all start working. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, eskerrik asko.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We are ready now to continue with our next speaker, but let me just quickly remind you that it's not just us here. We also want to hear from international stakeholders.
Gure helburua, gure ametsa, enpresak eraldatu eta hobeak egitea da, gizarte hobeago bat lortzeko. Eta hori praktikara eramateko, fabrika kultura eraldatzeko errendimendu handiko zentroa ari gara eraikitzen Miramonen, lehena gainera munduan, enpresa kultura berria errealitate bihurtzeko. Naiz eta eraikina 2023ko urtarrilean, gutxi gora bera irekiko den, dagoeneko 70 enpresa inguru hasiak dira, fabrika programa berriarekin. Eta kantuak dioena egin nahi dugu, hau da, eman ta zabaltzazu munduan fruitua. Alegia munduari irekiko gara, Gipuzkoa enpresa kultura eraldaketaren erreferente bihurtu dadin.
Bien, los beneficios para la organización, pues principalmente el talento, ¿no? Y, por supuesto, la alineación y el empuje necesario que aporta esa participación para conseguir sacar adelante esos proyectos transformadores que nos hacen falta para conseguir nuestra estrategia, ¿no? Aquella visión que tenemos. Y, por supuesto, pues beneficio para la empresa y para el entorno en sí, pues no sobra talento en ninguna organización, ¿no? Y el talento está en las personas. Entonces, el utilizar ese talento, pues definitivamente nos lleva a pensar que juntos somos más, ¿no? Y eso es aplicable también al entorno, porque la organización forma parte de ese entorno y vuelve a ser aplicable lo de que juntos somos más.
Employee participation has a lot of benefits, and it's a very important element for companies to be more performant, more resilient, and more sustainable. This has demonstrated by many researches and studies.
Todos conocemos los beneficios que aporta la participación en los tres, respecto a los tres agentes, ¿no? Por una parte las personas trabajadoras, por otra parte lo que es la propia empresa, y luego está el territorio, ¿no? Los beneficios que se aportan al territorio. Desde un punto de vista global, si nos vamos y pensamos en los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, sinceramente creo que la empresa participada contribuye muy específicamente a algunos de los mismos, ¿no? Sobre todo a la lucha contra la desigualdad, al empleo, un empleo de calidad y a la salvaguarda de ese empleo de calidad. Hay otros objetivos de desarrollo sostenible en los que también tiene una aportación considerable, pero yo destacaría sobre todo esos. Y eso llevado a Gipuzkoa, nos encontramos con un territorio en el que el nivel de desigualdad es, si no es el más bajo de Europa, de los más bajos de Europa. Nos encontramos en un territorio con unos desarrollos comarcales totalmente cohesionados, con empresas muy enraizadas en cada una en su comarca, buscando un equilibrio territorial relevante. Esto no es casual. No es casual que en Gipuzkoa haya tantas empresas participadas, tantas sociedades laborales, haya cooperativas, haya otro tipo de empresas participadas y nos encontremos con indicadores de este tipo.
A través de este proyecto hemos conseguido elevar el compromiso de las personas, lógicamente porque ellos han podido tomar parte en la definición del proyecto. También se ha conseguido una comunicación transversal, lo que ha conllevado a una mayor cohesión de los equipos y a un mayor desarrollo del conocimiento de las personas. También han formado parte de las metas de crecimiento de la compañía y todo esto ha generado un Gamesa más ágil, flexible e innovador. Gaur egun, kontekstu globalari eta digitalari aurre egiteko, animatu egiten ditugu enpresei horrelako proiektuetan parte hartzea.
Alors, les avantages de la participation, de nouveau, la participation à quoi? Donc, ce qui est important, ce qui est pertinent, ce qui nous intéresse, c'est la participation à la propriété, c'est la participation au capital. Alors, on sait que ça apporte beaucoup d'avantages dans beaucoup de domaines. Je vais me concentrer sur un avantage. C'est une formule qui permet facilement d'organiser la vente des entreprises aux salariés, donc la transmission des entreprises, business transmission, de telle manière que les salariés ne doivent pas payer, c'est gratis. Alors, c'est quelque chose qui existe beaucoup aux États-Unis et en Grande-Bretagne. C'est quelque chose qui devrait aussi être introduit dans nos pays, et aussi bien en Espagne. Alors, ce qu'on connaît en Espagne, c'est la participation, l'actionnariat direct, individuel. Les formules dont je parle, c'est de l'actionnariat collectif et indirect. Et c'est ça qui permet de faire des choses que pour l'instant, nous ne faisons pas en Europe et qui seraient très avantageux pour tout le monde.
Bueno, el beneficio está fundamentalmente en que cada uno de los miembros de la empresa, tanto desde el punto de vista de los dueños como desde el punto de vista de la dirección o como el punto de los trabajadores, aportan un plus en la gestión y en la generación de los productos de las mismas. Solo pongo un ejemplo. Si a dos personas yo les pongo a construir un muro y a una de ellas le digo que el muro es para una catedral, ¿harán el mismo muro?
Hemen open enpresa askorekin lan egiteko zortea daukagu eta enpresa mailan lehen esan dudan lerrokatzea eta konpromisoa direla uste dugu onura nagusienak. Zeurea bezala sentitzen baduzu zerbait, horrengatik gehiago eman eta borroka egiteko prest zaude normalean. Lurralde mailan, enpresen jarraipena eta iraunkortasuna dira gure ustez ere onura nagusiak.
Employee participation is great for a business, it's great for the employees who work in that business, and also for the economy in which that business operates. Employee ownership generates better business outcomes, improved productivity. It creates more wealth for the employees and improves their sense of well-being. And all of this is reflected in better outcomes for the local and regional and national economies in terms of reducing inequality, and also the wider corporate purposes that many employee-owned companies embrace, looking after the environment, society, and governance generally.
Pasatzen ari garen heinean, ezagutzaren ekonomia batera, ekonomia hortan beharrezkoa da lehiakorrak izateko pertsona bakoitzak dakarren hoberena enpresa proiektuan jartzea. Horretarako parte hartzea elementu zentrala da. Hau da, nekez ulertu daiteke pertsona konprometitu bat parte hartzeko aukerarik ez badauka, ezta? Hortaz, parte hartzea eta enpresen lehiakortasuna uste dut oso lotuta dauden kontzeptu diela, eta etorkizunean uste dut gero eta gehiago gongo diela. Hortaz, bi klabe horiek lehiakortasuna eta parte hartzean etzat erabat bat datozen kontzeptu dira. Eta bigarrengoz, lurraldeari begira, hor azpimarratuko nuke elementu zentral bat niretzat dela aktibitate ekonomikoen sustraitzea. Personaren parte hartzean inguruan, da batez ere, nik uste gakoa dagoela jabetzan parte hartzean, ematen da lotura garbi bat aktibitate ekonomiko, persona eta lurraldearen artean, ezta? Persona langile eta jabetan inean, horrek eramaten dau enpresaren erabakiak logika jakin batetik hartzea. Hau da, ez da epe motxeko irabazien maksimizaziotik, baizik eta epe luzeko eta enplegua mantentzeko logikatik hartzen diala erabaki asko. Horrez ekartzen da, azkenean, aktibitate ekonomikoak territorioan lur hartzea, eta horrek ekartzen da, batetik aberastasun banaketa bat, eta bestetik epe luzeko proiektuen egonkortasun bat. Azken batean esango nuke, pertsonen parte hartzeak enpresan ekartzen duela lurralderentzat kalidade oneko bizitzarako elementu zentral bat, eta bestalde epe luzeran mantenduko dian proiektuen realitate bat.
Los beneficios que aporta la participación en la empresa, bueno, pues el hecho de tener un proyecto compartido, tener unos objetivos compartidos, tener todos claros los objetivos, evidentemente la información es compartida también. Eso nos da que en los momentos de dificultad, por ejemplo, la flexibilidad con respecto a otro tipo de sociedades es importante. Y bueno, pues el hecho de trabajar en equipo y demás también creemos que ayuda a la evolución de la empresa. Con respecto al territorio, bueno, pues Gipuzkoa tiene una red social importante. La mayoría de las empresas somos empresas pequeñas, muchas empresas familiares, y cuando llega el momento del relevo generacional, pues hay veces que se pierde empleo. Entonces nosotros lo que vemos es que la participación, si es en los tres ámbitos, pues genera arraigo en el territorio. Los problemas de deslocalización, que venga una multinacional y te compre, porque sí que es verdad que la industria guipuzcoana, la vasca en general, la guipuzcoana en particular, pues tiene sus conocimientos y sus capacidades, y al final termina la empresa pues en Alemania, en otros países. Entonces creemos que es muy importante para el arraigo territorial.
So the advantages of employee ownership are broad, and we've got decades of research now from every continent across the world about the impact of employee ownership. So employee ownership makes companies stronger because it makes them more competitive. They tend to grow faster in terms of sales growth, employment growth. They tend to be more productive. It tends to make employees stronger because they have greater net household wealth. There's wonderful research. My favorite is from the United States, where we found that employee owners have 92% greater net household wealth than non-employee owners. Employee ownership also tends to make communities stronger because it roots companies in the communities. The companies that are more likely to stay, they're more likely to survive difficult economic times like the recent recession we've all been struggling through because of COVID. The greater wealth, of employees, the greater performance of companies, and the greater economic activity flowing throughout communities spreads the benefit of employee ownership far beyond the people who are directly involved in it.
Orain bai, jarraituko dugu.
Right, so we are now ready to continue to hear from the next speaker, Professor Jens Lovitz from the Kenzo Institute, and also a professor at the Viadrina University. I don't know where he is right now. He might tell us now. He's going to tell us about the books Financial Participation for a New Social Europe and Gipuzkoa with a territorial strategy. Oh, I can see you're in the car. He's on his way from Germany to Italy. Good morning. Whereabouts are you, Jens?
Good morning. Apologies for this unusual setting, but we're actually in the Piedmont region in Italy, visiting pilot projects not for employee financial participation, but for consumer financial participation in renewable energy. But we've just stopped here to make this presentation. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm not sure whether you can hear me. Do you hear me? I have no audio. Hello? Yes,
we can
now
hear
I
you
hear you.
fine, Jens.
Okay, very well. So sorry about this. So I'll share my screen now. As I said, apologies for the setting. And I just wanted to briefly introduce you to, just a moment, I put this on full screen. There we go. I would like to give you a short introduction to the book that we have now translated into Spanish and into the Basque language. And the title of this book, which goes back to a project that we started in 2003, is Financial Participation for a New Social Europe. Participación financiera para una nueva Europa social. Unfortunately, I can't pronounce it in Basque, but the background of this book is a report of the European Parliament on asset formation, which was issued in 2003 and called on the Commission to undertake studies focusing on specific questions, amongst others, on the feasibility of financial participation in small and medium-sized enterprises, and the possibility of implementing share ownership schemes based on the British, Irish, and US ESOP model, that is employee stock ownership plans in other EU member states. And over the years, we have actually translated this book into various languages. The most recent EU initiative that we are referring to is an own initiative report of the European Parliament of the 23rd of October 2018. As I mentioned, just the book has already been published in 6 languages. So the first versions were French, German, and English. We then 2 years later had an Italian translation, then a Polish translation, a Russian one, which is also available, and now finally the Spanish and the Basque version. To give you a quick impression of the comparative situation that the book presents, in a nutshell, there are major differences in Europe in regard to the legal framework, to tax incentives, and the attitudes of social partners, political parties, and governments. From the analysis that the book presents, we can identify a top group that is Ireland, notably also Spain, France, Italy, Austria, Slovenia, and the UK. And from these best practice countries, we have 2 lessons. One is that it is very important to have a consistent and overall regulatory framework to support employee share ownership, and that this framework should above all offer reliable and constant support measures. What is interesting is that when targeted promotion takes place, employee share ownership in small and medium-sized enterprises is not only possible, but it is also effective and practiced in many countries. The focus on employee share ownership in small and micro enterprises has various aspects, one of them being the reintegration of unemployed. And this is actually where the example of Sociedades Laborales is particularly interesting, because contrary to common belief, it not only shows that employee share ownership is also practiced in these micro enterprises, but that we see a success story that is now 30 years old and shows actually that Sociedades Laborales can also contribute to the reintegration of unemployed people into the labor market via the mechanism of capitalizing unemployment benefits, either to set up a new Sociedad Laboral or to join an existing one. We are now looking into the question whether this concept is also transferable to other countries. And as it is not a legal form in its own right, but is based on an ordinary corporation, be it a limited liability company or a joint stock company, there are actually no obstacles for transference to other countries. I would like to highlight a couple of case studies and best practices that reflect the life cycle of a company, that is the foundation phase, where actually Spain's Sociedades Laborales, and especially in the light of the reform of 2015, are really important, but also the phase of consolidation and continuity, which is reflected in the new Austrian law on employee participation foundation from 2017. And finally, of course, as we've already heard from other speakers in the video, the question of company succession is central. And this is where, for example, the UK Employee Ownership Trust, introduced in 2014 in its present form, which of course has been around for a while in the UK, is important, but also the French FCPE de reprise from 2009, and in the focus of the book, actually, the US Employee Stock Ownership Plan, where you find an annex with actually concrete case studies reflecting best practice. Finally, just a quick, I would like to cast a quick light at the question of harmonization at the EU level. A pilot project for DG Market, which we actually directed in 2013-14, put forward a 5-point plan for the promotion of employee share ownership, which was supported by the Commission and the European Parliament, and is the first concrete European roadmap to further action at EU level. In addition to long-term legislative measures, this plan provides a series of soft measures that can be introduced in the short and medium term and are not tied to lengthy legislative procedures. Let me also mention the question of tax incentives, because this is always disputed and there are long discussions, most recently in Germany, actually, where in 2021, a new law for startups supports employee ownership. The analysis of our book and of other works show that tax incentives, while not a prerequisite for employee share ownership, they are, however, an effective instrument for the promotion of employee share ownership. And in this context, it should be noted that the dispute over the introduction and level of tax incentives for different types of companies often obscures the view of a whole range of other important possible support measures. And this is where with what I would like to conclude today, a few recommendations from the experience of the last years to policymakers. The first one refers to the promotion of employee share ownership in small and medium enterprises using intermediary entities, especially in the context of business succession. We observe that there is an increasing number of European countries that use trusts, foundations, or special purpose vehicles as a form of indirect employee shareholding, notably in Austria in 2017, but also in Ireland, UK, in Hungary, in France, and in Slovenia. What is important in this context is that employees should be treated on equal footing with uninvolved third-party buyers when acquiring company shares, especially with regard to taxation. Last but not least, and this reflects the current discussion in quite a few European countries, legislative measures should try to simplify the implementation of employee share ownership and reduce transaction costs. And a good example here is Italy, which in 2019 introduced an exemption to the transfer of limited liability companies' shares for employee shareholders from the obligation of notarization. And this is important because the transfer of shares often is burdened by the fees notarization brings along. Of course, I should mention here that this exemption is not only for employee share ownership, but it's a general exemption for the transfer of shares of limited liability companies. But it, of course, also is important for employees which benefit in the same way. And with this short overview of the most recent developments at the European level, I would like to close this short introduction to the book, and I wish you fruitful discussions and hope that this was all clear and that the transmission went well. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, now I have audio again.
Thank you so much. So we're ready to continue. We're going to next be hearing from Joaquín Perona. Mr. Perona is the Regional Minister for Taxation and Finance, and he's going to tell us about participation indicators from the point of view of taxation.
Bueno, egunon denoi, eskerrik asko etortzatik.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us. It's such a pleasure, an honor, standing here and thinking back of the fantastic journey that we have started. My presentation will be divided into 3 different sections, starting with telling you what the situation was at the beginning of our mandate in Gipuzkoa. We will then see what can be done in the future, and then we will see some facts and figures. Our president, Mr. Olano, has given you some already, but they're very interesting for us to understand the evolution. So, our mandate started in 2015, and let me remind you that 2012 and 2013 were really tough in Gipuzkoa. A lot of companies going bankrupt. The economy was not looking great when we got to power. You know how important it is for companies to stay in our territory, for them to have a bright future ahead of them, for jobs to stay, and that was certainly the case back then. The unemployment rate at the time was 13%. Now it's 7%. So it was a terrible peak as far as unemployment is concerned. So generally speaking, it was not the best economic context. Decisions had to be made. They were not easy decisions, and decisions had to be made fast. So I guess I haven't said anything very new so far, right? We know the secret really is having solid companies for jobs to be sustainable. Solid, strong companies will generate wealth and assets and resources, and thanks to that, public institutions will be able to do what we have to do, which is social policies and continue to reduce the inequality gap. So at that time, we set ourselves 3 objectives, 3 strategic objectives, together with our president, Merkel, and Javier too. So starting firstly with the objective of rooting companies in the territory with a good outlook for the future, and we saw that employee participation was one way to do so. The second objective was consolidating projects in our territory, and last but not least, attract new people to our territory and new wealth to our territories. So let's start with workers or employees' participation. Well, Gipuzkoa was we had a lot of positive elements going for us. We had the right awareness and sensitivity, and we wanted to build on that and consolidate all of that. Back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of companies had been set up, foundation at the time, and those employers would soon retire. There was a risk for those companies to end up elsewhere, to be relocated. Those were our thoughts at the time. And some of you sitting here with us today are business people, and you know that the handover is or can be a rather complex process that has to be led properly, a situation which is not easy, as I said, for either owners or employees. And we've seen so many cases of failure because of lack of leadership.
Eta hori erabat lerrokatzen dena aldunditikan bultzatu nahi ditugun elementuen artean. Eta azkenik, aipatu duen bezala, eta bideoan ere asko aipatu dezute, erabakitze guneak benetan hemen geratzea. Ze instrumento ditugu aldundian? Javierrek aipatuko dizkizue pixka bat sustapen ekonomikotik, bi adar nagusi ditugu, sustapen ekonomikotik zer egin dezakegun, eta beste aldetik daukagun eskumena fiskalitatean. Hor, sartu ginenean segi.
In the year 2016, there was a regional law having a tax clear line, and the perspective of the purchaser was taken into account just as the opposite perspective of the seller. So this is a regional law which is being consolidated and approved year after year. In the year 2019, it has already been said, at that point, there was another law or regulation being passed for the creation of new entities by employees. We also need to improve all those different reinvestment processes, reinvesting in the companies. We did not know when the next crisis was going to come, but at least we have already some forecast to try and be able to reply and give a response in future crises. And something essential was to be ready for the future. And then what we have done has been to adapt, to incorporate the different adaptations based on that scheme. We have already spoken about the context. Let's now talk about figures. Mr. Olano has already been sharing some figures with us. In these recent years, we have had 1,700 people. In this last year, in the COVID period, there have been different operations. We have been flexibilizing certain tax elements. We wanted to support not only those who were needy, but also those who had investment projects, those who were integrating new employees so as to carry out these operations. And we have seen how the evolution has been positive. Gender perspective, as you know, in taxation terms, we give a bonus incentives to companies hiring women so as to promote or to overcome the gender gap. 3 out of 4 were men being hired and 1 out of 4 were women. In this hiring perspective, we want to keep on promoting gender equality with different measures. And now, very quickly, very briefly, I would like to share with you and tell you that we have been told about that model that was born in the year 2014. Yes, the model that was born in the United Kingdom. We had a representative come in here. We met with the gentleman and we told him about what we are doing. This person visited us in the year 2017 and we told him, we have already 40 companies that have joined the project and little by little we are making this effort. And he asked, and do you know how many companies we have had last year within this employee stock ownership? 86. That was the total in this employee stock ownership plan. And that was important for us. Sometimes we look at ourselves in the mirror and we only see faults and mistakes. But it is true that compared to the UK, our evolution was quite good in terms of this employee stock ownership. So we felt very proud. The situation was not as bad as that. 87 in the UK. And This was also important for us to give us a further boost and to keep on working. Usually, we tend to classify companies in terms of their size, based upon the size. As we have already said, one of our concerns was linked to handover in companies, succession, and there has been a development both in big as well as in small companies, not only in terms of taxation and the different tax benefits that can be assisting. In these cases of handover, we see that we also have loyalty measures to generate this loyalty. If we can have 3 or 4 people remaining there, if they keep on being rooted and keep on hand in hand in companies, we are making easier this handover process in companies, this succession. We are trying to elaborate different schemes we are testing, but we are quite optimistic in terms of what we are doing. And now I would like to talk about the investment represented by these 1,738 people. 25.9 million euros. This has been the contribution. This has been the economic investments being done in those companies. Because Grain and some others have said that in the United Kingdom, they make trusts, but there are no economic contributions, and that is what they said to us. You have the same vision as Scottish people. You ask for workers, for employees to make an effort, and we said, yes, that is something essential for us if we want to get their engagement. So we were talking about investment funds, and today we have these 26 million euros, this fund created by the employees in these 300 different companies participating at this plan. We will see the result, but for the moment the evolution is quite positive. And to finish, let me tell you about the model we want to obtain here in Gipuzkoa. And if we want to reply to the question, let's first see what the other generations have done. They were extracting value and they were trying to root it here. I would like to talk about long-term vision, trust, reinventing themselves, but always being ambitious, humble but ambitious, always willing to be within this process of continuous improvement. And there have been 2 pillars. First of all, focusing on good practices at the international level, learning from them, bringing that here. And the second pillar is cooperation, collaboration, teamwork. We have already been talking about our managers, about their accountability, about their responsibility. We have managers in this room. Thanks to your contribution, thanks to your effort, we have been able to work to move forward. We have been able to develop this scheme, this plan that has helped us to identify the specific needs. What do I mean by that? This is something that we have to do hand in hand, not only all of us working in the provincial government. Yes, we need you. We need to work hand in hand with you, with your collaboration. Thank you very much to that collaboration. That's all. Thank you.
Eta gaurko azken gonbidatuarekin
And last but not least, we have our last guest, Mr. Javier Larrañaga, who is the Deputy or the Regional Councillor for Economic Promotion, Tourism and Rural Environment. Mr. Larrañaga, whenever you want. Thank you very much to all of you for being here. I am the last one, and that always implies a risk, because almost everything has already been said. Once I heard somebody say that a good event A good event should have loads of coffee and not to speak too much in the closing presentation. Well, we are in the pandemic, yes, but here we are strengthening this network. As Mr. Olano was saying, as the General Deputy was saying at the beginning, for us it is only evident that we want to have solid economy, strong economy. That is what we want to leave for our next generations, just as we have been able to benefit from our ancestors. Only like that we will be able to offer well-being to our citizens. We always say that that something essential for us is not to have inequalities, and that is why this participation model once again goes hand in hand with these two goals, and it will help us reach the different objectives. Now the same thing in Spanish. Yes, I think that it is much more important now to go and have coffee together. Let me focus on our tools now. What I am going to do is to spend a couple of minutes speaking about the challenges we have ahead of us, both from the economic and social point of view, and also the challenges linked to the model. I'm going to try and mix both things together. Our tools, we have subsidies, assistance programs, aid programs. It is true that we have been learning more and more and being able to offer good tools. We also have tax benefits, and we are also learning from that perspective. Financing these operations, they also have a very important component in terms of how we finance them, because people joining these participation programs or plans are at a certain moment in their life. They have a mortgage to pay, for example, they have a family. And I do not want to say anything bad about banks, but it is true that these people, these employees, need some support in terms of guarantees. And that is why we signed an agreement with Elkargi to try and reinsure, to give an additional guarantee. Those who wanted to participate in these participation programs, we wanted them to benefit from this financing, from this subsidy. And as I said before, we are in a continuous learning program, in a continuous learning process, all of us. We live within an ecosystem where we all share goals and we all learn together. And through etorkis una eraikis, it's true that we've been able to develop not only learning processes, but also experimentation processes. And out of that experimentation, we are still learning a lot. And we have different pilot programs where already 20 different companies have got involved, have started participating, and they are going to be essential in this leap forward. And even if I have already spoken about it, let me go back to the ecosystem where we all are together in this same journey. And I dare to say that we are all making our own contribution. We are all making an effort because we want to strengthen our values, our culture, which has been essential to come here. Effort, having a long-term vision, this collective engagement, this collective effort, this engagement also with the territory, with the region, and with society. Let me now go and talk about the challenges. Participatory model, this participation model brings competitiveness, or at least it is important to get us there and to end up being competitive. It helps us build a collective project where individual effort is essential. But it is essential because we have a shared collective goal. We have a long-term vision. And this contributes to underpin our decision-making structures. That was also very important too. It makes it possible for us to retain talent, a model that favors cohesion, and that is why it goes hand in hand with the goal that I have already spoken about, to have an equal society, to overcome inequalities. And now I would like to go to other general challenges. I think that we are going towards a structure where our companies are going to have a distributed model, geographical distribution. What do I mean by that? We are going to have and manage diversity, cultural diversity, diversity also in terms of participation. And in this sense, I am talking about the percentage of time that we are going to be giving or allocating. There was somebody in one of their projects who said to us the following: your parents used to work in a company, they were working in a company, and you are maybe going to be working in 6 different or 7 companies. And your children will be working in 7 companies simultaneously. Well, I don't know, but it is true that more and more we are going to end up sharing our professional time and effort in more than one company, in more than one project. So these different models are going to have and manage different relationships, different situations, where there will be certain employees working at 100% and others who will be sharing that activity with other things. So huge diversity also in terms of the participation of our employees in the different projects and in the different companies. At the same time, digital transformation is there, and this is leading us to more and more decentralization. So once again, participation model is deploying itself, and we are going to have and live with this decentralization in terms of the decision-making process. And I think that this model is going to help us tackle the challenges in terms of living together, more distribution, more decentralization. All that is going to have an important challenge, because this higher distribution, this higher decentralization is going to be clashing against a demand that exists, because we need strong leadership. So we are within that balance. On the one hand, we need to have strong leaders so that this participation model can succeed, but at the same time, if we bear in mind the goal and the objective, it is important also to be making decisions in a decentralized way. So we need to be able to find a solution. That balance is going to be a challenge, and I am sure that we will learn more and more and be able to make it happen. Yes, we need strong leadership, because whenever we join a participation or a participatory model, if we join the model thinking that we are buying or purchasing our job, our position in the company, maybe they will be wrong. That is not the right attitude. That can end up being a problem. We are going to have members and non-members in certain companies, and if maybe some employees think that they have more rights compared to the others, they will be wrong as well. What they have is more obligations. And no. So that is why, once again, we need strong leadership. We need strong leaders, and we need to strengthen this culture, our collective engagement. We need to be engaged with the project, but also engaged with society. This effort culture, this culture where we promote and where we value effort has to be implemented. We are convinced about the efficiency of this model. We think that the model will help us to obtain competitiveness. We need companies that are competitive, but we also need people and institutions. Competitive people and institutions. I think that we have a solid foundation, and all these elements are going to be useful for us in this region to end up being a highly competitive region. And this will make it possible for us to leave to our children a good and solid model, just as our ancestors did. Once again, I underline that we want to overcome inequalities. That is essential for us. I would like to finish and say thank you to all those who have been made this event possible. Thank you for joining us in this journey. In the Diputación, in the provincial government, we want to keep on working together with all of you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Javier. Thank you for this short conclusion. And now it is true that we are all going to be able to share coffee. You will be able to have coffee, and also we are going to be able to share a bite together. So thank you very much once again. Bye.